I walked into the restaurant, my heart pounding with excitement. I'd saved for months, scrimped and sacrificed, just to experience this once, to sit in a place like this and feel like I belonged. I had no idea what kind of night it would turn into. As I approached the host station, the owner of the restaurant, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharp tongue, looked me over, a sneer forming on her face. "This is business class for real people," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're in the wrong place." I froze, trying to process her words. "I paid for this meal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed, the sound cold and cutting. "Liar. You think you belong here. Look at you." Before I could say another word, she grabbed me by the collar, yanked me backward, and shoved me aside like I was nothing. My wallet flew from my hand, landing on the floor with a thud. "Get out," she spat. "You don't belong here." I stood there, humiliated but unbroken. She didn't know who she was dealing with. She didn't know who my son was. Jessica Morrison, the owner of the restaurant, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she sized me up. "You think you're just going to waltz in here?" she sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. She crossed her arms, surveying me like I was some kind of imposter. I tried to stand tall, still shaken but determined. "I'm just here for my reservation," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She scoffed, shaking her head. "Your reservation, please. You're out of your league here, old man." Her words were venomous, and her gaze swept over me with a judgment that burned. The restaurant was full of patrons, but none of them spoke up. Jessica made it clear she was in charge. She owned this place and everyone knew it. I didn't belong, not in her eyes. She grabbed my wallet without warning, threw it across the room like I didn't matter. "I bet you've stolen everything you own," she muttered, the disgust in her voice sharp. She shoved me out of the VIP section, her grip harsh, her words laced with cruelty. "Move. You're not wanted here." I wasn't used to this. In all my years, I had never been treated with such open hostility. But as I stood there, humiliated and bleeding inside, I knew something had to change. I didn't know yet, but Jessica's actions would soon lead her to a downfall she never saw coming. I stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant, my hands trembling. The shock hadn't worn off yet. Jessica's words still echoed in my ears. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now. As I tried to collect myself, a couple seated near the entrance gave me a curious glance. I tried to avoid eye contact, but it felt like everyone was watching. Jessica walked past me with a condescending smile, barely hiding her satisfaction. She stopped at the front desk and waved a hand dismissively in my direction, as if I was an insignificant inconvenience. "I'll have him removed myself," she snapped to the waiter. I turned to face her, my heart pounding. "I paid for this," I said, trying to make her see reason. "I have a reservation." She scoffed, her voice rising. "A reservation? For what?" To sit in this section, she threw her arms wide, indicating the classy restaurant around us. "Look at you. You don't belong here." I stood my ground, though the sting of her words hurt more than I wanted to admit. This wasn't about me. I had earned every penny to sit here to enjoy this moment. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, trying to steady my voice. Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, clearly annoyed. "Then I'll have you escorted out," she sneered, and with that she walked away without another word. My blood ran cold as I realized I wasn't going to get through to her. She was already deciding my fate without even giving me a chance. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. I could feel the eyes of the other diners on me, some pretending to be absorbed in their menus, others just staring, as if they were waiting for a spectacle. I could almost hear their whispers. I had no doubt Jessica was trying to provoke me into doing something, anything, that would make her look justified. I was determined to hold my ground. This meal wasn't just about food, it was about dignity. But Jessica wasn't done. She'd made it clear that she didn't see me as worthy of even being here. A few moments later, she returned, her expression cold. This time, she didn't say a word. She just reached for my coat and roughly shoved me toward the exit. Her grip was like iron as she pushed me forward, not caring about the humiliation she was causing me. "Excuse me," I said, a little more forcefully. "You have no right to treat me like this. I paid for this meal, and I deserve to be treated with respect." She didn't flinch. "Respect? You don't know what respect is. You think you can just walk into my restaurant and take up space like you're some kind of VIP." Her voice was sharp, bitter, and dripping with disdain. Before I could respond, she grabbed my wallet, which had slipped from my hand earlier, and tossed it across the room. "You probably stole it anyway," she spat, just loud enough for nearby diners to hear. "Like everything else, your kind steals." My face flushed with anger, but I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I bent down to pick up my wallet, my hands shaking slightly. As I straightened up, I saw the disbelief in the faces of the people around me, but no one spoke up. The shame was suffocating. Jessica stood there watching me, arms crossed. "Go on," she taunted. "Pick it up. I'll give you a head start before I call security." I reached down to grab my wallet, my fingers brushing the smooth leather as I bent. I felt the weight of Jessica's gaze on me, like a physical force pushing me down further. When I straightened up, her words hit me like a slap in the face. "Go ahead, make a scene," she said, her smile smug. "It's not like you'll be able to do anything about it. This is my restaurant and I run it however I damn well please." The humiliation burned in my chest. This wasn't just about a meal anymore. This was about dignity, something I thought I had earned through decades of hard work. Something that Jessica had now completely stripped from me. I tried to take a deep breath to steady myself, but it wasn't working. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It wasn't just an insult. What she had done, what she was doing, was far worse. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But I'm not going to let you get away with this. You can't just treat people like this and expect no consequences." She gave me a mocking look. "Consequences? Like what? A lawsuit? Go ahead, file one. It'll get tossed out just like every other complaint." As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Marcus. My son, he had been watching quietly from the back of the restaurant, his gaze locked onto the scene unfolding. Our eyes met for just a brief second, but in that moment I saw something in his face, something I hadn't seen before. A cold, controlled anger, a realization that made everything click. I knew who he was now, but I had no idea what was coming next. I walked out of the restaurant feeling like the entire world had watched me crumble. But I wasn't beaten yet. Not by Jessica, not by anyone. As I stepped outside into the cool air, I could feel the sting of what had just happened. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. There was something bigger at play, and I wasn't going to let her win. I stood outside the restaurant trying to shake off the sting of Jessica's cruelty. The door closed behind me with a final decisive thud, and I could still feel the weight of the humiliation pressing down on me. I had wanted this moment to be special, but now all I could think of was how easily I had been discarded, treated as if I was invisible. I hadn't made it past the front steps when I saw Marcus, my son, standing there, his face a mask of controlled anger. He was calm, far too calm for a man who had just watched his father be humiliated in public. He approached me slowly, his hands in his pockets, his eyes never leaving me. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Let's talk." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The emotions were too raw, too tangled. I just nodded and followed him as he led me around the side of the restaurant, out of sight from the rest of the diners. I could see how he was holding himself, every muscle tense and focused. This wasn't the Marcus I knew. This was someone different. "Give me a second," he said as we stopped in a quieter corner. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. I watched him type his expression hard, then press send. A brief silence followed as he waited, his jaw clenched. "Dad, it's going to be okay," he said, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his calm facade. The moment hung between us until his phone buzzed. He glanced down and sighed. "It's done. The legal team's on it." I looked at him confused. "What do you mean, Marcus? What's done?" He met my gaze, and for the first time that night I saw something more than anger in his eyes. It was determination, cold and clear. "I'm not letting her get away with this," he said, his voice low. "You won't have to fight this alone." A moment later, 2 uniformed officers stepped out from the back door of the restaurant. They moved swiftly, their presence unmistakable. My heart sank. "Are they calling the cops on me?" Marcus shook his head. "No, Dad. They're here because of me." Before I could react, Marcus walked toward the officers. "This man's been treated unjustly," he said, his tone icy but measured. "And I'm not leaving until this is handled." I stayed where I was rooted to the spot. The officers paused, but didn't approach immediately. One of them exchanged a look with the other before nodding. It wasn't what I expected, but somehow it didn't surprise me. Marcus wasn't just any customer. He was a shareholder, someone whose power reached beyond the surface of a simple dispute. Jessica's voice rang in my ears, her words cutting through the calm like a blade. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I had my son, my flesh and blood on my side, and he wasn't about to let this go. When I turned back to the door, the sound of the restaurant's manager, Derek, reached my ears. He was walking quickly, his face flushed, obviously rattled by whatever Marcus had just set in motion. I could hear his heavy footsteps before I saw him trying to block the path between me and Marcus. "Marcus, you can't just barge in here," and Derek started, but Marcus cut him off. "I'll say it once," Marcus said, his voice firm, cutting through the tension. "I want Jessica and you to leave. Now." Derek blinked, taken aback by the calm authority in Marcus's words. "What are you talking about?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I just spoke to the legal team. Your employee's actions are about to be investigated." He turned slightly, his eyes never leaving Derek's face, including yours. The words landed heavily, and for a moment Derek stood frozen, unsure how to respond. His usual bravado was gone. It had been replaced by a fear that was hard to mask. I don't know what kind of stunt you think this is, but it's not a stunt, Derek, Marcus interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. This is me telling you and everyone in this restaurant that the game is over. We both know you've been covering for her. You and Jessica, your whole operation has been running on a system of lies. A system that ends tonight. I watched Derek's face shift from confusion to realization. He knew exactly what Marcus was talking about. I saw his gaze flicker toward the door, as if weighing his options. But there were no more options for him, no more hiding behind Jessica's influence. The walls were closing in on him. I'm calling corporate, Derek muttered, his voice shaky. Marcus didn't even flinch. Call them. I've already spoken to them. By now the officers had entered the restaurant, their presence undeniable. Jessica appeared in the doorway behind Derek, her face flushed with a mix of anger and fear. But she stopped short when she saw Marcus standing in front of her, calm and unyielding. She opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing her before she could say a word. You're fired, Jessica, he said, his tone final. And Derek, you're next. There was a heavy silence. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a dispute at a restaurant. This was bigger. It was about everything Jessica had done to me and to others like me, and the system that had been complicit. It was all coming down right here, right now. I want both of you to leave, Marcus said to Derek and Jessica, his voice cold. And if you try to argue, security will escort you out. I'll make sure of it. The two of them stood there stunned. Derek opened his mouth to protest, but then closed it. Jessica glared at us both, her pride shattered, her empire crumbling. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time that night, I wasn't standing alone. Marcus had stepped in, and he wasn't backing down. I'll see you both in court, Jessica muttered before she turned to leave. Marcus didn't even acknowledge her. He simply turned to me, offering a quiet nod. Let's go, Dad. We're done here. The restaurant went quiet as Jessica and Derek finally turned to leave. The murmurs of disbelief from the other patrons filled the air. It wasn't over yet. Marcus had made his move, but this was just the beginning. I'm going to handle this my way, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the stillness. The door closed behind Derek and Jessica with a final thud, but the silence didn't last long. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's voice rang out calm and unyielding. He stood there still and composed, but the gravity of his words landed hard. What you've just witnessed is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern, a system of abuse, and I'm here to end it. The weight of his words settled over the room. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the tension, the change. People began to put down their forks, their eyes shifting from Marcus to me. We were no longer just victims of Jessica's cruelty. We were now witnesses to something bigger. I own this place, Marcus continued, his tone even. I'm the CEO of Hayes Global Holdings, and as of tonight, I'm taking full responsibility for what happens next. Marcus didn't wait for any further questions. With a few swift movements, he pulled out his phone and swiped through it, projecting the contents onto the large flat-screen TV behind him. The room went silent again as the documents flashed on the screen. Jessica's personnel file, the complaints, every single one, the dozens of incidents that had been swept under the rug. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart pounded in my chest. Here's a list of passengers, Marcus said, his voice steady, but with an edge of controlled fury. Passengers like Mr. Hayes, he motioned toward me, and many others. All of them mistreated, humiliated, removed without cause. Jessica and Derek made sure none of these complaints were ever heard. And here they are, in black and white. I want you to see them. All of them. Each name that appeared on the screen was like a punch in the gut. The incidents, the lies, the cover-ups. Everything was laid bare for everyone in the room to see. A few patrons looked at each other in disbelief. Some were shaking their heads. Others were pulling out their phones, capturing every moment. The truth was flooding the room unstoppable. Sarah, Marcus said, turning to her with a sharp look. You're not going to stay quiet anymore. Show them what you have. Sarah stepped forward, her hands trembling but with a newfound strength. She pulled out her phone, her backup, the one she'd kept hidden from Jessica. With a few quick taps, she shared everything. I've been documenting Jessica's behavior for the past 3 years, Sarah said, her voice shaking at first, but growing steadier with each word. I've got photos, recordings, witness statements from other crew members who were too afraid to speak up. The screen changed again, this time to a gallery of images. Jessica caught in the act. Passengers with tears in their eyes, blankets ripped away, bags tossed aside. I could feel the sting of everything that had been done, everything that had been allowed to happen. I was told to stay quiet or lose my job, Sarah continued. I kept quiet for far too long, but not anymore. A few passengers stood up, their voices rising in support of Sarah. "She's right," one woman yelled. "I saw it too." Marcus stood back, watching his face expressionless. It was all unfolding exactly as he had planned. "Jessica, Morrison, Derek Sullivan, Marcus," said his voice louder, now addressing the room. "You both will be removed from this restaurant and from my company effective immediately. And I'll make sure you face the consequences of your actions." The room exploded in applause. Patrons who had once been quiet witnesses to the injustice were now speaking up, some filming, some cheering, but all in agreement. Jessica's grip on her world was crumbling. As she was escorted out, humiliated, I felt a rush of relief wash over me. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about what she did to me. This was about justice, about bringing down the walls of a corrupt system brick by brick. Marcus had finally done it. He had exposed the truth, and the world could no longer look away. The moment Jessica and Derek left, a strange stillness filled the room. Patrons who had been watching the whole ordeal whispered to each other, but now there was a new energy, one of relief and solidarity. People stood up, some offering apologies, others simply nodding in quiet support. The weight of the injustice had lifted, and in its place was something more powerful, the truth. I stood there, my heart still racing, but now with a sense of gratitude I hadn't expected. Marcus stood beside me, his presence a comforting anchor. "Dad, it's over," he said, his voice calm, though I could see the anger still simmering beneath. It wasn't just over for us, it was over for the system that had allowed Jessica's behavior to thrive. The patrons started to talk louder, sharing their support, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, the power of collective truth. As the restaurant buzzed with activity, I finally allowed myself to breathe, knowing that Marcus's actions had made the difference. The changes didn't take long to follow. The next day, Marcus called in the legal team. The files on Jessica and Derek, as well as the hidden complaints, were immediately reopened. This wasn't just about firing people, it was about accountability. Marcus ensured that every complaint that had been ignored was now being investigated thoroughly. News outlets picked up the story quickly, and the number Justice for Robert Hayes hashtag spread like wildfire. The company had to respond. Within hours, Crown Atlantic released a statement detailing immediate reforms, mandatory diversity and inclusion training, the creation of a whistleblower protection program, and a full review of all discrimination complaints. They didn't just promise change, they were taking action. Jessica and Derek were both fired and faced legal repercussions for their roles. Jessica for assault and battery, and Derek for obstructing justice. But the real consequence wasn't the legal action, it was the public reckoning. The story had gone viral, and now the world knew the truth. Months later, life was different. Marcus's reforms at Crown Atlantic were making an impact. Employees now felt safe to speak up, and diversity programs were put into practice. It wasn't perfect, but it was real change. The airline was no longer a company that swept issues under the rug. It was one trying to be better. As for me, I sat in an airport lounge preparing for a flight to Chicago. My seat 4C was waiting for me, but it wasn't just any seat. It was the same one I had been shoved out of months ago. This time, though, the experience was different. When I boarded, the crew greeted me warmly, offering to get me anything I needed. But the real comfort came not from the luxury, but from the dignity I finally felt. The plane took off, and I settled into my seat, feeling a weight lift off my chest. As the crew prepared for takeoff, I noticed a small plaque on the tray table. A white rose sat delicately on it. It was a tribute to Margaret, the woman I had loved, and the silent witness to everything that had led me here. "I did it, Maggie," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I kept my dignity, and I won't ever let it go. Dignity isn't given. It's defended, and it's ours to keep." Looking back, the win wasn't the most important part. If I'd let anger guide me, things would have turned out differently. It was the legal process, the evidence, the truth that made all the difference. I stood my ground, but it was the law that gave me the power to truly fight back. There's a fine line between standing up for yourself and letting emotions take over. Anger might feel good in the moment, but the truth, evidence, and process are what create real change. Acting out of rage only leads to more chaos, while following the law brings lasting results. Keep records. Make sure you have evidence. When things get beyond your control, don't hesitate to involve professionals. Whether it's an attorney, authority, or a trusted ally, they'll help you turn the tide. Communities thrive when they respect the law, not when power is abused. That's the real victory.